to attract foreigners as well as even returning Indians to be able to come into academia. I think one of the most important ways by which we can and hopefully instill a sense of academic interest within the universities is the fact that we need to recognize that universities are important knowledge-creating institutions, and there should be the kind of intellectually vibrant environment that universities create within those avenues should sufficiently inspire people, particularly the young people, to consider academia as one of the career opportunities as they desire, as they think about various options. We discussed earlier about the issues of how the disparities prevail within the states. Professor Kannan talked about the problems in Nagaland, and I'm sure other parts of Northeast as well as some other parts of India. I think there is no doubt that issues relating to accessibility and equity are very central and important issues in the context of many Indian universities. I think any effort to increase the gross enrollment ratio, just as it should not ignore the issues of quality and maintenance of standards, it also should take into consideration that who are the people you want to bring them into higher education. What is the kind of social expectations that currently prevail in our country for people to seek higher education, and how do we balance the question of financing of higher education on the one hand and to ensure equity and accessibility of higher education on the other. In this regard, I would obviously mention the fact that it's very interesting, again, India is a unique experience that historically we've had public universities, great universities of learning, be it the Banaras Hindu University or the Delhi University and many other universities around the country, which have played a very important role in strengthening not just the institutional framework, but clearly advancing knowledge, innovations in science and technology and many other fields. But over the years, when we decided to expand and indeed open up private sector into the field of higher education, unfortunately, private sector contribution historically in higher education has largely been mediocre, commercial and profit-making endeavors, and not in the lines of how private universities like Harvard and Yale and Stanford and NYU, four of them being private universities, were created through philanthropic initiatives. I strongly believe that we absolutely need to have a far greater role for the private sector, including privatization in the field of higher education, but I'm absolutely clear that it has to be non-profit and it has to be philanthropic and it has to be made by people who have no interest other than solely for philanthropic initiatives. And if we don't do that, we will end up creating a multi-tiered, mediocre sector of education, which will make private sector education more expensive, but most importantly, will not have any academic standards whatsoever. And through that process, if we attempt to seek the increase of gross enrollment ratio, we will not be achieving the objectives for which we want to increase the gross enrollment ratio. I also strongly believe that we need to have a more stronger, but at the same time, a more acceptable and a congenial regulatory framework in the field of higher education. It is shocking for us to see the kind of complex, multi-layered, extremely confusing, contradictory regulatory structures that we have created, not just with a single body which is involved in largely setting the agenda of the higher education, but also multiple bodies which are focusing on education relating to different disciplines. And then you have the multi-tiered sectors of the role of the Union Ministry for Human Resources Development, and then the state governments, all of that, and then the statutory processes. It's clearly extremely complex and highly bureaucratic and produces enormous opportunities for massive corruption in the higher education sector. It is no secret that we all know that higher education sector in India is one of the most corrupt systems which we have created, and it is clearly unsustainable, and it is not in the best interest of the development of higher education in this country. It is unfortunately talked less, but clearly we know that the kind of regulatory structure and the vested interest that the higher education sector has been infused with produces enormous opportunities for a lot of bribery and corruption, which clearly undermines our ability to maintain academic institutions with centers of excellence and learning. Lastly, I would also like to stress upon the fact that research and knowledge creation is so fundamental to university education. I would be very wary of any distinction between teaching institutions on the one side and research institutions on the other. Having been an academic for at least a good number of my years of learning, I feel that you cannot be a good teacher if you are not an active researcher, just as your research will not be effective if you have not been able to use that research in the sort of teaching and pedagogic engagement with students and others. So essentially, we need to recognize that our higher education institutions, universities, should have a substantial focus on research and scholarship, which is going to, in many ways, inform the teaching and vice versa. And unfortunately, just as we can say that we want to have a sound infrastructure for promoting research, if we do not put resources to create that, we will not be able to achieve that. Now, if you look at, for example, the top universities around the world, the faculty-student ratio is approximately 1:10. Both Harvard and Yale maintain a faculty-student ratio of 1:10. Most Indian universities, as you know, maintain a very sad sort of a faculty-student ratio, which essentially means that we need to really create more resources and from multiple sources to have a very acceptable, I do believe that 1:10 is the luxury of developed countries. I think, I mean, at least our university, we maintain a 1:15 faculty-student ratio. But the fact of the matter is, we need to address the faculty-student ratio because it will have a direct impact on learning on the one side, but more importantly, the time that is available for our faculty to be engaged in research, scholarship, publications, which ultimately produces knowledge and potentially seeks innovation. I think these are some of the issues I wanted to raise. The issue of higher education and reforms has been part of our historical framework right from the beginning. A very interesting quote by Dr. Radhakrishnan, who chaired the Commission on University Education way back in 1948-49, and I will just read those lines and then stop here. And he mentioned, and I quote, "The most important and urgent reform needed in education is to transform it, to endeavor to relate it to the life, needs, and aspirations of the people, and thereby make it the powerful instrument of social, economic, and cultural transformation necessary for the realization of the national goals. For this purpose, education should be developed so as to increase productivity, achieve social and national integration, accelerate the process of modernization, and cultivate social, moral, and spiritual values." Unquote. Thank you very much.